In this Makola Market, I'll make things difficult for you as long as I am king here, Kwame said in a loud, angry voice. The morning sun cast long shadows across Makola Market as 17-year-old Afia arranged her coconuts in neat rows. Her weathered wooden cart, inherited from her grandmother, creaked under the weight of the fresh green coconuts she had carefully selected at dawn. The sweet aroma of coconut water mixed with the earthy scents of the bustling marketplace, creating a symphony of smells that had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. Afia wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a small streak of coconut fiber across her forehead. She had been selling coconuts in this same spot for 3 years now, ever since her parents died in a car accident, leaving her to fend for herself. The other vendors had watched her struggle initially, some offering help, others simply observing to see if the young girl would survive in the competitive world of Makola Market. But Afia had persevered, her gentle nature and genuine smile earning her a loyal customer base who appreciated not just her sweet coconut water, but her warm personality. As she called out to potential customers, her voice carried a melodic quality that seemed to dance through the air. Fresh coconuts, sweet water straight from the tree. She had learned that success in the market wasn't just about having good products, it was about connecting with people, making them feel seen and valued. Her grandmother had taught her that kindness was the secret ingredient that made everything taste better, and Afia carried that wisdom with her every day, treating each customer like family. Across the market, in the prime location where foot traffic was heaviest and shade was most abundant, stood Kwame Asante's magnificent stall. At 32, he was the undisputed king of Makola Market. His empire built on imported goods, real estate, and an uncanny ability to spot profitable opportunities before anyone else. His stall wasn't just a place of business. It was a monument to his success, with polished wooden displays, imported fabrics draped as decoration, and goods that sparkled under strategically placed lights. Kwame moved through his domain with the confidence of a man who had never known failure. His expensive Kent cloth draped perfectly over his broad shoulders, and gold rings adorned his fingers, catching the light as he gestured while speaking to customers. Vendors throughout the market spoke his name with a mixture of respect and envy, knowing that his approval could make or break a small business. He employed dozens of people, owned properties throughout Accra, and was rumored to have connections that reached all the way to the government offices. But success had not made Kwame humble. Instead, it had fed a growing arrogance that manifested in how he treated those he considered beneath him. He saw the market as a hierarchy, with himself at the top and small vendors like fruit sellers and coconut vendors at the bottom. In his mind, their struggles were proof of their lack of ambition and intelligence, not understanding that not everyone had been blessed with his advantages or opportunities. It was on a particularly busy Friday morning that fate decided to interweave the paths of Afia and Kwame. Afia had just sold her last coconut to a grateful customer when she noticed her cart's wheel had come loose. As she bent down to examine the problem, her cart tilted dangerously, sending several empty coconut shells rolling across the narrow pathway between stalls. She scrambled to collect them, her heart racing as she saw one shell rolling directly toward Kwame's pristine stall. The coconut shell came to rest against a display of expensive imported ceramics, and though it caused no damage, Kwame's reaction was swift and thunderous. He stormed out from behind his counter, his face contorted with rage as he spotted Afia hurriedly collecting her shells. "You careless girl," he bellowed, his voice carrying across the market and drawing the attention of nearby vendors and customers. "Do you have any idea how much those pieces cost? More than you'll make in a year selling your cheap coconuts." Afia looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She had never spoken to Kwame before, though she had certainly noticed him and his successful business. "I'm so sorry, sir," she stammered, clutching the coconut shells against her chest. "I didn't mean for it to happen. My cartwheel is broken and I was just trying to." But Kwame cut her off with a dismissive wave of his hand, his expression showing nothing but contempt for the young woman kneeling before him. "Sorry." Kwame's laugh was harsh and bitter, echoing through the suddenly quiet section of the market. "Sorry doesn't pay for damaged goods, and it certainly doesn't excuse such carelessness. Look at you, dressed in rags, selling coconuts from a cart that's falling apart. You don't belong in the same market as serious business people. His words were like physical blows, each one designed to wound and humiliate. Other vendors had stopped their work to watch the confrontation, some looking uncomfortable, others simply curious to see how it would unfold. Afia felt her cheeks burn with shame as Kwame continued his verbal assault. "This is what happens when children try to play at being business owners," he declared, his voice growing louder and more theatrical. "You're nothing but a street vendor, and you'll never be anything more. People like you are why this market has a bad reputation. You bring down the property values just by being here." He gestured dismissively at her simple dress and worn sandals, making sure everyone could see the stark contrast between his wealth and her poverty. The young woman's eyes filled with tears, but she fought to keep them from falling. She had faced hardships before, had endured the whispers and pitying looks of people who saw her as just another orphan street child. But something about Kwame's cruelty cut deeper than anything she had experienced. Perhaps it was the public nature of the humiliation, or the way he seemed to take pleasure in her pain. As she stood up slowly, her legs shaking, she made a silent promise to herself that she would never again allow anyone to make her feel so small and worthless. The market around them had fallen into an uncomfortable silence, broken only by the distant sounds of traffic and the occasional cough from an onlooker. Afia could feel the eyes of dozens of people on her, some filled with sympathy, others with the morbid curiosity that draws people to witness another's downfall. She recognized some faces, customers who had bought coconuts from her, fellow vendors who had shared friendly greetings over the years, but none of them stepped forward to defend her or challenge Kwame's behavior. Mrs. Abina, who sold vegetables 3 stalls down, looked away when Afia's eyes met hers. Kojo, the young man who sold phone cards nearby, suddenly became very interested in organizing his merchandise. Even the customers who had been browsing seemed to sense the tension and quietly moved away, not wanting to become involved in the unfolding drama. The silence was perhaps more painful than Kwame's words, as it drove home just how alone and powerless she truly was in this moment. Kwame seemed to feed off the attention, his chest puffing out with pride as he basked in his demonstration of power and status. He had successfully reminded everyone in the vicinity of the natural order of things. He was at the top and people like Afia were at the bottom. "Let this be a lesson to all of you," he announced, addressing the crowd of onlookers. "Excellence rises to the top, and mediocrity sinks to the bottom. It's the natural way of things." With that pronouncement, he turned on his heel and walked back into his stall, leaving Afia standing alone in the middle of the pathway, surrounded by the debris of her dignity. Afia gathered her remaining coconut shells with trembling hands, her movements mechanical and disconnected as she tried to process what had just happened. The broken wheel on her cart made the journey back to her small room even more difficult, forcing her to drag it behind her while it scraped and bumped along the uneven ground. Every few steps, she had to stop and readjust her grip, her palms already raw from the rough wooden handle. The walk home had never felt so long. Each step seemed to echo Kwame's words in her mind. "You'll never be anything more." The familiar sights of her neighborhood, the narrow streets lined with small houses, the children playing football in the dust, the women preparing evening meals, all seemed different somehow, as if she was seeing them through new eyes. She wondered if this was her destiny, to forever be trapped in this cycle of poverty and powerlessness, selling coconuts just to survive another day. When she finally reached her small rented room, Afia collapsed onto her thin mattress and allowed the tears she had been holding back to flow freely. The walls seemed to close in around her as she replayed the humiliation over and over again, each memory making her feel smaller and more worthless. But as the tears began to subside, something else began to grow in their place, a spark of determination that surprised her with its intensity. She wiped her eyes and sat up straighter, her jaw setting with newfound resolve. Kwame thought he knew who she was and what she was capable of, but he was about to learn that he had gravely underestimated the young coconut vendor. That night, Afia sat by the dim light of her single bulb, a notebook open in front of her and a pencil worn down to a stub in her hand. She had never been one to keep detailed records of her business. Most days, she simply counted her money at the end and hoped it would be enough for food and rent. But now, she began to write down everything she could remember about her sales, her costs, her customers, and most importantly, her dreams. She wrote about the regular customers who sought her out specifically, praising the sweetness of her coconut water and the freshness of her selection. She documented the compliments she had received about her friendly service and fair prices. As she wrote, she began to see patterns and possibilities that had been invisible to her before. Perhaps there was a way to expand beyond the single cart, to reach more customers, to build something bigger than what she had ever imagined possible. The notebook became her confidant as she poured out her thoughts and plans onto its pages. She sketched rough diagrams of improved cart designs, wrote lists of potential business strategies, and most importantly, she wrote down her ultimate goal in large, bold letters. "I will show Kwame Asante that he was wrong about me." The words looked small on the page, but they carried the weight of her entire future. She closed the notebook and held it against her chest, feeling for the first time in her life that she had a clear purpose and direction. The next morning, Afia approached her work with new eyes and renewed energy. Instead of simply selling coconuts, she began to study the business with the intensity of a scholar. She observed which coconuts sold fastest and why, noting that customers preferred certain sizes and that the sound of the coconut when tapped could indicate the quality of the water inside. She paid attention to the timing of sales, discovering that mid-morning and late afternoon were her busiest periods. She began engaging her customers in longer conversations, not just to be friendly, but to understand their preferences and needs. Mrs. Akojua, who bought coconuts every Tuesday, mentioned that she wished there was a way to take the coconut water with her to work instead of having to drink it at the market. Young Emmanuel, a university student, complained about the inconsistency in sweetness from one coconut to another. Each piece of feedback became valuable information that Afia carefully noted in her growing collection of observations. Most importantly, she began to see her customers not just as people who bought her products, but as partners in her business who could help her understand the market better. She realized that Kwame, for all his success, treated customers as transactions rather than relationships. This insight gave her hope that there might be room in the market for a different approach, one built on genuine care and understanding rather than intimidation and status. She was beginning to understand that true success might require not just better products, but better relationships. Determined to expand her knowledge beyond coconut selling, Afia began spending her evenings at the local library, a small, poorly ventilated building with flickering fluorescent lights and worn wooden tables. The librarian, an elderly woman named Ms. Ajoa, initially looked skeptical when the young coconut vendor asked for books about business and economics. But when she saw Afia's genuine hunger for knowledge and her careful attention to every page, Ms. Ajoa became a valuable ally in her educational journey. Afia devoured every business magazine, newspaper article, and book she could find. She read about successful entrepreneurs from around the world, studying their strategies and setbacks with equal intensity. She learned about market analysis, customer service, product development, and financial planning, concepts that had once seemed as foreign to her as advanced mathematics. Each new piece of knowledge felt like a small victory, a step closer to the person she was determined to become. The other library patrons, mostly students and teachers, initially viewed her with curiosity and sometimes condescension. A coconut vendor reading business journals was an unusual sight, and some whispered among themselves about her presumptions. But Afia had grown accustomed to being underestimated, and she used their doubt as fuel for her determination. She would show them all, especially Kwame, that intelligence and ambition were not the exclusive domain of the wealthy and educated. Every night, she returned to her small room with her head full of new ideas and her notebook full of carefully transcribed insights. Armed with her new knowledge, Afia began implementing small but significant changes to her business. She invested in a proper scale to ensure consistent pricing and purchased a small cooler to keep her coconuts fresher throughout the day. She also began offering extras that other vendors didn't provide, small plastic bags for customers who wanted to take coconut pieces with them, and a simple loyalty system where regular customers received every 10th coconut at a discount. The changes were modest, but their impact was immediate and noticeable. Her sales increased by nearly 30% within the first month, and more importantly, customer satisfaction soared. People began bringing friends to try her coconuts, and some customers started making special trips to the market just to visit her stall. Word began to spread that the young coconut vendor near the entrance offered not just good products, but exceptional service. However, her growing success did not go unnoticed by other vendors, and not all of them were pleased. Some complained that she was making them look bad with her innovations, while others accused her of putting on airs above her station. The criticism stung, but it also reminded her that change was never easy and that success often bred resentment. She thought of Kwame's words about mediocrity sinking to the bottom and realized that perhaps some people preferred to drag others down rather than elevate themselves. This understanding strengthened her resolve to continue improving, regardless of what others might say. As Afia's small section of the market began to buzz with increased activity, the ripple effects reached even the most established vendors. Kwame, secure in his position at the top of the market hierarchy, had initially paid no attention to the young coconut vendor he had humiliated months earlier. But when his own foot traffic began to decrease slightly, customers lingering at the market entrance longer instead of proceeding directly to the premium stalls, he began to take notice. His assistant, Ya, mentioned during their morning briefing that the coconut vendor seemed to be doing unusually well. "She's got lines of customers sometimes," Ya reported, "and people are saying good things about her service." Kwame's response was a dismissive laugh, but privately, he felt a small prick of irritation. The natural order of the market was that customers came to him first, drawn by his reputation and prime location. The idea that they might be distracted by a mere coconut vendor was absurd, yet the evidence was undeniable. That afternoon, Kwame found himself walking past Afia's improved setup, noting the small crowd gathered around her cart and the animated conversations she was having with customers. He saw the cooler, the neat organization, and the genuine smiles on people's faces. For just a moment, he felt a flicker of something that might have been respect, or even admiration. But the feeling was quickly smothered by his ego and his belief that such success was either temporary or somehow undeserved. He returned to his stall with renewed determination to remind everyone who truly ruled Makola Market. Afia's conversations with customers had revealed a consistent request. People wanted to enjoy coconut water throughout the day, not just when they could visit the market. This insight sparked what would become her first major innovation. Working with a local carpenter in the evenings, she designed a simple but effective system for extracting coconut water cleanly and storing it in reusable containers. The process was labor-intensive, but it allowed her to offer fresh coconut water in portable form. The response to her new product exceeded even her optimistic projections. Office workers, students, and busy parents eagerly purchased containers of coconut water to take with them, often returning the next day to refill and purchase more. She began to understand the difference between meeting existing demand and creating new markets, a lesson that would prove invaluable in the years to come. Her humble cart was evolving into something closer to a small business hub. But innovation brought new challenges. The additional preparation time meant longer hours, and the quality control required for packaged products was far more demanding than selling fresh coconuts. She had to learn about hygiene standards, container cleaning, and inventory management. Some days, she worked from dawn until well past sunset, her hands raw from cracking coconuts and her back aching from the constant bending and lifting. Yet each satisfied customer and each handful of earned coins reinforced her belief that she was on the right path. The sacrifices were investments in a future that grew clearer and more attainable with each passing day. Afia's growing success inevitably attracted the attention of the Market Association, a group of established vendors who collectively managed disputes and maintained order within Makola Market. The association was dominated by successful traders like Kwame, who used their influence to protect their interests and maintain the status quo. When complaints began reaching them about a coconut vendor who was disrupting the natural flow of business, they decided it was time to investigate. The inspection came on a busy Thursday morning, led by Mr. Osei, the Market Association's secretary, and accompanied by 2 other prominent vendors. They examined Afia's setup with skeptical eyes, questioning her permits, her hygiene practices, and her right to offer services that differed from traditional coconut vending. Each question felt like an accusation, and Afia could sense that they were looking for reasons to shut down her operation rather than ensure its compliance with market standards. Fortunately, Afia's months of careful preparation and adherence to proper business practices served her well. Her permits were in order, her hygiene standards exceeded requirements, and her customer service record was impeccable. After an hour of thorough scrutiny, the inspectors could find no legitimate grounds for complaint. Mr. Osei's parting words carried a clear warning. Just remember, young lady, that this market has traditions and expectations. Don't let success go to your head. As they walked away, Afia realized that her real challenges were just beginning. Success had made her visible, and visibility brought both opportunities and dangers. The market inspection had been intimidating, but it also revealed who among her fellow vendors truly supported her efforts. Mrs. Abina, who had remained silent during Kwame's public humiliation months earlier, approached Afia the day after the inspection with an apology and an offer of friendship. "I should have spoken up for you before," she admitted, "but I was afraid of making trouble for myself. I see now that standing up for what's right is more important than avoiding conflict." Other small vendors began to show their support as well, sharing tips about dealing with difficult customers, offering to help during busy periods, and most importantly, treating Afia as an equal rather than an upstart who needed to be put in her place. Kojo, the phone card vendor, revealed that he had been quietly recommending Afia's coconuts to his customers for months. "You treat people with respect," he explained, "and that's rarer than it should be around here." The solidarity among the smaller vendors created an informal network of mutual support that strengthened all of their businesses. They began referring customers to each other, sharing bulk purchasing opportunities, and even coordinating their operating hours to maximize overall foot traffic in their section of the market. Afia realized that while Kwame saw the market as a hierarchy with himself at the top, she was building something different, a community of equals working together for mutual success. This collaborative approach would become a defining characteristic of her business philosophy and a key factor in her eventual triumph. By the end of her first year of serious business development, Afia had saved enough money to make her first major expansion. She purchased a second cart and hired her first employee, a young woman named Akojua who had been struggling to support her family through sporadic housework. The decision to hire help was not just practical but philosophical. Afia remembered what it felt like to be dismissed and overlooked, and she was determined to create opportunities for others who shared her circumstances. Training Akojua proved to be as educational for Afia as it was for her new employee. She discovered that explaining her methods and standards forced her to refine and systematize her approach. What had begun as intuitive customer service became a replicable system of excellence. She documented everything, from the optimal ripeness indicators for coconuts to the precise timing for customer interactions, creating the foundation for what would eventually become a comprehensive business operation. The two-cart operation doubled her daily capacity and allowed her to experiment with location-based strategies. While Afia maintained her original position near the market entrance, Akojua operated from a spot closer to the center, targeting different customer demographics and traffic patterns. The experiment was successful beyond their expectations, and within 3 months, they were considering a third cart. For the first time since her parents' death, Afia began to feel that financial security might be achievable, not just survival. Afia's success began creating opportunities for others beyond her direct employees. Local coconut farmers found themselves with a reliable customer who paid fair prices and provided consistent demand. The carpenter who had helped design her storage system received additional work as other vendors sought similar innovations. Even the library where she had spent countless evening hours studying benefited, as Afia made regular donations of books and supplies to support other aspiring entrepreneurs. This expansion of positive impact brought Afia a deep sense of satisfaction that went beyond financial success. She was beginning to understand that true prosperity was not just about accumulating wealth for oneself, but about creating value for entire communities. Every person whose life improved because of her business was validation that her approach was not just profitable, but meaningful. She kept a journal documenting these stories, partly for her own inspiration and partly as evidence that business could be a force for good. However, the growing attention also brought increased scrutiny from established market powers. Kwame, who had initially dismissed her success as a temporary fluke, began to realize that the young coconut vendor was becoming a legitimate business force. Her customer base had grown beyond individual consumers to include small restaurants and beverage vendors who purchased her coconut water for resale. The scope of her operation was approaching the level where it could no longer be ignored or dismissed as insignificant. Managing employees proved to be one of Afia's greatest learning challenges. Akosua was enthusiastic and hardworking, but she lacked the business intuition that Afia had developed through years of struggle and study. Training her required patience, clear communication, and the ability to provide constructive feedback without damaging confidence or motivation. Afia discovered that leadership was not about commanding others, but about inspiring them to achieve their best work. The experience also taught her the importance of systems and standards. What worked when she was operating alone as a single vendor required adaptation and formalization when multiple people were involved. She developed checklists for daily operations, quality control procedures, and customer service guidelines that ensured consistency regardless of who was manning the cart. These systematic approaches would prove invaluable as her business continued to grow. Most importantly, Afia learned that success brought responsibilities beyond her own welfare. Akosua depended on the job for her family's survival, and customers relied on the consistent quality and service they had come to expect. The weight of these responsibilities sometimes felt overwhelming, especially when she remembered that she was still just 19 years old. But rather than being crushed by the pressure, she found strength in knowing that her success enabled others to succeed as well. This understanding would guide her decision-making throughout the challenging years ahead. Success brought its first serious test when a dispute arose with one of Afia's coconut suppliers. The farmer, encouraged by competitors who resented Afia's growing influence, suddenly doubled his prices and demanded payment in advance for future deliveries. The move was clearly designed to squeeze her business and potentially force her back to the hand-to-mouth existence she had worked so hard to escape. The situation required quick thinking and strategic planning. Afia could not afford to lose access to quality coconuts, but accepting the farmer's demands would eliminate her profit margins and potentially bankrupt her growing operation. She spent sleepless nights analyzing her options, consulting her carefully maintained financial records, and seeking advice from her network of small vendor allies. The crisis forced her to mature rapidly as a business leader and decision-maker. Her solution was both bold and risky. She approached other coconut farmers directly, offering long-term contracts with guaranteed volumes and fair prices in exchange for reliable supply and quality standards. The approach required her to commit most of her savings to secure the agreements, but it also diversified her supply chain and reduced her dependence on any single source. When her original supplier attempted to return to their previous arrangement, Afia politely declined, explaining that her business had evolved beyond his capacity to serve. The incident taught her valuable lessons about supplier relationships, risk management, and the importance of never becoming too dependent on any single partner. As her business stabilized and grew, Afia began to think beyond immediate survival and profit toward longer-term impact and legacy. She established relationships with local schools, providing fresh coconut water for students at reduced prices and sponsoring educational programs about nutrition and entrepreneurship. These initiatives were not just charitable gestures but strategic investments in community goodwill and future customer development. She also began participating more actively in market association meetings, initially as an observer but gradually as a contributing voice in discussions about market improvement and vendor support. Her practical experience with innovation and customer service provided valuable perspectives that even established vendors found useful. Slowly, she was earning respect not through intimidation or wealth display, but through competence and genuine contribution to collective success. However, not everyone welcomed her growing influence. Kwame, in particular, viewed her rising status with increasing suspicion and resentment. He had worked for years to establish himself as the unquestioned leader of the market community, and the sight of a former coconut cart vendor gaining respect and influence challenged his sense of natural order. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would test everything Afia had learned about business, leadership, and human nature. 2 years after her humiliation at Kwame's hands, Afia made a decision that would transform not just her business, but the entire coconut water industry in Ghana. She invested her accumulated savings in a small processing facility that could produce bottled coconut water on a commercial scale. The move was risky. She was competing directly with established beverage companies, but her market research had convinced her that there was significant demand for a premium, locally produced coconut water brand. The facility was modest, employing just 6 people and producing a few hundred bottles per day, but it represented a quantum leap in Afia's business ambitions. She had moved from selling individual coconuts to creating a branded product that could reach customers throughout Accra and beyond. The bottling operation required new skills in manufacturing, quality control, distribution, and marketing, challenges that pushed her to expand her capabilities in ways she had never imagined when she was dragging her broken cart home from the market. Most importantly, the bottled coconut water allowed her to tell her story to a broader audience. Each bottle carried a label that identified it as a product of Sweet Afia Enterprises, and she made sure that her commitment to quality, community support, and fair trade practices was prominently featured in her marketing materials. Customers were not just buying coconut water. They were supporting a local success story and a business philosophy that prioritized people over pure profit. The emotional connection proved to be as valuable as the product quality in building brand loyalty and market share. The success of Afia's bottled coconut water attracted attention from unexpected quarters. Local business journalists began writing articles about the young entrepreneur who had built a successful company from a single coconut cart. Radio stations invited her for interviews, and business schools asked her to speak to their students about grassroots entrepreneurship. The attention was flattering, but more importantly, it provided marketing exposure that she could never have afforded to purchase. Regional distributors began approaching her with offers to carry her products in stores and restaurants throughout southern Ghana. Each new distribution agreement required careful negotiation to ensure that her quality standards and brand values were maintained, but the expanded reach multiplied her sales volume and established Sweet Afia as a recognized brand rather than just a local curiosity. Within 6 months of launching the bottled product, she was earning more in a week than she had previously made in a month. The growth required constant adaptation and learning. She hired additional staff, moved to a larger facility, and invested in more sophisticated equipment. Each expansion brought new challenges in management, quality control, and financial planning, but also new opportunities to create jobs and support her community. Afia began to understand that successful entrepreneurship was not a destination but a continuous journey of growth, adaptation, and impact. She was no longer just running a business. She was building an institution that could outlast her personal involvement. Despite her success in the broader market, Afia never forgot her roots in Makola Market. She maintained a presence there, not just through her original cart operations but as a supporter and advocate for small vendors who faced the same challenges she had once experienced. She established a small fund to provide interest-free loans to promising micro-entrepreneurs, and she regularly purchased supplies from market vendors even when cheaper options were available elsewhere. Her return visits to the market created a complex mix of reactions among the vendor community. Many celebrated her success as proof that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle. They saw her as an inspiration and a symbol of hope for their own aspirations. Others, however, viewed her success with suspicion or resentment, questioning whether she had somehow abandoned her origins or forgotten the struggles of everyday vendors. Kwame's reaction was the most complex of all. He watched her interactions with other vendors with a mixture of admiration and irritation, recognizing her genuine care for the community while resenting the implicit challenge her success posed to his own position. Her presence reminded him daily that the young woman he had once dismissed as worthless had achieved something remarkable, and that his judgment had been fundamentally flawed. The cognitive dissonance created by this reality would eventually force him to confront some uncomfortable truths about himself and his own values. By her 4th year in business, Afia's enterprise had evolved far beyond coconut water. She had launched a line of natural fruit juices, established partnerships with local farmers to source premium ingredients, and opened her first retail store in a busy Accra shopping district. The store served as both a sales outlet and a showcase for her brand values, featuring locally made furniture, employing community members, and displaying information about the farmers and suppliers who contributed to her products. The expansion required sophisticated business planning and management skills that would have seemed impossible during her coconut cart days. She worked with consultants to develop strategic plans, hired professional managers to oversee daily operations, and invested in technology systems that could support a multi-location business. Yet she remained intimately involved in all aspects of the operation, from product development to customer service, ensuring that growth did not come at the expense of the quality and values that had built her success. Most significantly, she began attracting investment interest from larger companies and financial institutions. While the offers were tempting, particularly those that promised rapid expansion and substantial personal wealth, Afia remained committed to maintaining control over her company's direction and values. She had seen too many promising businesses lose their soul in pursuit of growth, and she was determined that Sweet Afia Enterprises would remain true to its foundational principles regardless of its size or success. Afia's success had not gone unnoticed by established beverage companies, and their response was swift and aggressive. Major brands launched their own coconut water products, often with significantly larger marketing budgets and distribution networks. Some attempted to undercut her prices, while others tried to duplicate her community-focused messaging and local authenticity claims. The competitive pressure was intense and required strategic thinking at a level Afia had never before experienced. Rather than engaging in a direct price war that would have favored larger competitors with deeper pockets, Afia doubled down on the qualities that made her brand unique: authentic local sourcing, genuine community connection, and superior product quality. She invested in customer education programs that helped consumers understand the differences between mass-produced and artisanal coconut water. She also leveraged her personal story and community relationships to build brand loyalty that transcended simple price comparisons. The competitive challenge also forced her to accelerate her own growth and improvement plans. She expanded her product line more quickly than originally planned, invested in more sophisticated marketing campaigns, and established exclusive relationships with key suppliers to protect her competitive advantages. The pressure was exhausting, but it also pushed her to develop capabilities and strategies that made her business stronger and more resilient. She was learning to compete not just with superior products, but with superior business intelligence and strategic thinking. In the midst of competitive battles and expansion challenges, an unexpected opportunity arose that would change the trajectory of Afia's business forever. A major international hotel chain was seeking a local beverage supplier for their Ghana properties, and Sweet Afia's reputation for quality and reliability had brought her to their attention. The potential contract was enormous, larger than all her existing business combined, but it also carried risks and requirements that would test every aspect of her operation. The hotel chain's standards were demanding, requiring consistent quality, reliable delivery schedules, and the ability to scale production rapidly if the partnership proved successful. They also insisted on exclusive arrangements for certain products and geographical areas, which would limit her flexibility but provide guaranteed volume and revenue. The decision required careful analysis of her production capacity, financial resources, and long-term strategic goals. After weeks of analysis and consultation with her advisors, Afia decided to pursue the opportunity aggressively. She expanded her production facility, hired additional quality control staff, and invested in delivery systems that could meet the hotel chain's logistical requirements. The contract negotiation process was intense and educational, teaching her about international business standards and the complexities of serving institutional customers. When the agreement was finally signed, it represented not just a significant revenue opportunity, but validation that her small coconut cart business had evolved into a legitimate competitor on the international stage. But success, as Afia would soon discover, comes with a price. Within weeks of launching the hotel partnership, everything Afia had built began to unravel. Her competitors weren't going to let her dominate the market without a fight. Supply chain disruptions, quality control crises, and betrayal from within her own team would push sweet Afia's empire to the brink of collapse. The little girl who once sold coconuts on the streets of Accra was about to face her greatest test yet. Would her business survive the pressure? Or would the weight of success crush everything she had worked so hard to build? The real battle was just beginning. Don't miss part 2, where we'll reveal the shocking challenges that nearly destroyed Afia's business, the betrayals that came from the people she trusted most, and how she fought back against all odds. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next in this incredible journey from street vendor to business mogul.